Have you ever been cheated on? I'm not talking about some casual mistake or a drunken one-night stand. No, I'm talking about the kind of betrayal that flips your entire life upside down. The kind that makes you question every choice, every word, every damn thing you ever thought was real. It's the kind of shit that haunts you, even after you think you've moved on. I'm not writing this to get sympathy or attention. I'm sharing my story because maybe like me, some of you need to know that you're not crazy and you're not alone. My wife, she cheated on me, and she did it with a smirk on her face like I was too stupid to ever find out. But I did. And let me tell you, I made sure she regretted it. Because in the end, I came out on top, and she's living in the wreckage of the life she destroyed herself. Let me start by telling you about her. I guess you'd say she was beautiful. No, is beautiful. It's not like that changed. She's one of those women who knows exactly what to do to get every eye in the room on her. She's a personal trainer at this high-end gym downtown, the type of place where people pay more for a month than I'd pay for a year. Every day, she's dressed in skin-tight yoga pants, her body basically sculpted from years of workouts. Flat stomach, toned legs, that perfect as she loved to show off, and of course, her long hair flowing down her back like something out of a shampoo commercial. Guys would literally stop mid-conversation when she walked by. And she knew it. God, did she know it? I can't even count how many times I'd catch her glancing at herself in every reflective surface, making sure everything was in place, enjoying the attention. When we first met, I was blown away by how gorgeous she was. I couldn't believe someone like her would even look my way. But what I didn't realize was that beneath all that beauty, there was a real piece of work hiding. A nasty, self-centered person who only cared about herself. But, of course, I didn't figure that out until years into our marriage when it was way too late. See, I run a small business. Nothing huge or fancy, but it's mine. I work my ass off to build it up from nothing, and it's brought in enough to keep us living comfortably. We've got a decent house, 2 cars, all the usual stuff you'd expect from a couple in their mid-30s who've made it. But somewhere along the way, things started to go south between us. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was just us growing apart. I don't know. But our relationship began to crumble, and it wasn't subtle. The sex? It went from something passionate and exciting to this routine, boring, mechanical thing we did once in a while just to check it off the list. It got to the point where she'd roll her eyes if I even suggested it. It felt like I was begging for scraps, and trust me, no guy wants to feel like that in his own marriage. It's humiliating. And when we weren't ignoring each other, we were fighting. And not even about the big, important stuff, no, it was always about stupid, petty crap. She'd leave the kitchen a mess, and I'd get pissed. I'd forget to pick up milk on the way home, and she'd act like I was the worst husband in the world. It was constant. There was no peace. The spark that used to be there, gone, replaced by a wall of resentment that seemed to grow higher every day. Then there was her phone. She was glued to it, day and night, scrolling, typing, laughing at things I wasn't a part of. I'd ask her what was so funny, and she'd give me some bullshit answer like, oh, just something from work. But you know when something's off. You can feel it. The secrecy, the late nights at the gym when her shifts were supposed to be over, the constant texting, it was like watching our marriage die in slow motion. Now, we had a group of friends, people we hung out with pretty regularly. We'd grab drinks, go to barbecues, all the usual stuff. There's this one girl in the group. Let's call her Claire. Claire, she's different. She's the kind of person who can light up a room without even trying. Funny, smart, caring, just a genuinely good person. The kind of woman who's always there for her friends, who listens when you talk instead of waiting for her turn to speak. I've known Claire for years, long before my wife ever came into the picture. We've always been friends, and that's all it ever was, at least on the surface. But if I'm being honest, there's always been something more there, a connection we never really talked about. I've caught her looking at me a certain way when she thought I wasn't paying attention. And there have been moments when she'd find an excuse to stand just a little closer than necessary. You know what I mean? It's those subtle things that only the people involved ever notice. But here's the thing, I never acted on it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was trying to do the right thing. I had a wife, a marriage, or at least I thought I did. So even though I could feel that pull toward Claire, I buried it. I didn't cross that line. Not then anyway. But let me tell you, Claire is important in this story. More important than even she realizes. Because as all this shit with my wife was going down, Claire was always in the background, quietly being a better person than my wife ever was. And in the end, you'll see how she played a part in everything. The cracks in my marriage were deepening. And even though I could feel it all slipping away, I didn't know just how far gone we really were. Not until the day I found out about the affair. And that? Well, that's a whole story on its own. There's this guy my wife works with. Let's call him Jason. A classic gym rat, the kind of guy who's all muscle and no brains. You know the type. Spends half his life in front of the mirror, flexing like it's a full-time job. Jason was the kind of trainer who'd throw out phrases like bro and gains with a straight face, thinking he was some kind of god just because he could bench press more than most. From the moment I met him, I couldn't stand the guy. It wasn't just his arrogance. It was the way he acted around my wife. Too comfortable. Too familiar. He'd joke around with her, throw his arm over her shoulder like it was no big deal, and I'd just stand there, gritting my teeth. She'd laugh it off, always saying, "Oh, he's just like that with everyone." But I wasn't buying it. There was something off about him. My gut told me to keep an eye on him, but I didn't want to be the paranoid husband. Maybe that's where I went wrong. I trusted her more than I should have. Anyway, one day started like any other. I woke up, went through the motions, kissed my wife goodbye as she left for work, and I started my day. Business was busy, the usual grind. Around lunchtime, I came home to grab something I'd forgotten. She wasn't home yet, and her phone was sitting on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't even think to check her phone. I'm not that guy, but it was lighting up with notifications like crazy. And something told me to pick it up. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I just didn't want to be blind anymore. I unlocked it. Yeah, I knew her password, and there was a message from him, Jason. And it wasn't about work. It was one of those messages that hit you in the gut before you even read the whole thing. He was asking her what time she'd be at their spot. Their fucking spot. My mind was spinning, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened their conversation. What I saw, it felt like someone punched me in the face. I'm talking about full-on, explicit shit. I'm not even going to repeat most of it because, honestly, it's disgusting. Messages about what they'd done, what they were going to do. Naked pictures, sexting, the works. It was all there in black and white, right in front of me. And then I saw something that made my blood boil. Jason had called me a wimp. A wimp. As if I was some clueless idiot he could mock while screwing my wife behind my back. I'm not gonna lie, the first thing I wanted to do was lose my shit. I wanted to throw that phone against the wall, storm into that gym, and break his face. Hell, part of me wanted to throw her out of the house and be done with it right there. But I didn't. Somehow, I kept my cool. I stood there, gripping the counter, taking deep breaths, trying to clear my head. I knew if I reacted right then, I'd lose control, and that's exactly what they'd expect. No, I needed to play this smart. I put the phone down, took one last deep breath, and made a decision. If she was going to screw me over like this, I wasn't just going to sit back and take it. I wasn't going to play the victim. I was going to take control of the situation and make sure she'd regret it. The first thing I did was message Claire. Remember her? The friend I've had for years, the one I always felt a connection with but never acted on? Yeah, her. I sent her a casual message, nothing too obvious, just a "hey, it's been a while, how have you been?" kind of thing. I knew exactly what I was doing. Claire was going to be part of this, whether she knew it or not. She replied pretty quickly, and before long, we were having this friendly back-and-forth conversation, laughing about old memories, catching up on each other's lives. It was all like casual, but in the back of my mind, I was laying the groundwork. This wasn't just some innocent chat. I had a plan, and I was going to make sure everything fell into place. Because here's the thing. I wasn't just going to confront my wife and that idiot Jason and give them what they wanted, a blow-up, a meltdown. No, that would be too easy for them. I was going to make them pay for this in a way they never saw coming. And Claire? She was going to be important, more important than she even realized. This was just the beginning. I thought seeing the messages between them was bad enough. But as I read through more, I realized just how deep this betrayal went. It wasn't just the texts or the occasional meetups after work. No, they were screwing around in the gym. The same gym where she worked, where she was supposed to be helping people get healthier, where she was supposed to be working. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. The place where she spent all her time, where she supposedly built her career and her reputation, was also where she was bending over for that moron, Jason. You'd think they'd at least be smart enough to keep it out of the workplace. But no, they had to do it right there, like a couple of horny teenagers who couldn't wait to find somewhere private. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. She always stayed late after her shifts. Always had some excuse about extra clients or needing to close up. Yeah, right. She was getting her workout in, just not the kind that involved any dumbbells. I wasn't going to let this slide. I needed proof. I needed something that would leave no room for excuses. That's when I remembered the gym had cameras. Every place like that does. High-end facilities like hers have security everywhere. But here's the kicker. No one watches those cameras unless something serious happens. The staff knows it, and obviously, those two idiots didn't care, figuring they could do whatever they wanted as long as nobody reported it. Well, they were wrong. So, I waited until the gym was closed for the night. I knew there was always a security guard on duty after hours. An old guy who probably couldn't care less about the place as long as he got paid. When I showed up, it wasn't hard to find him. He was sitting at the front desk, probably half asleep, scrolling through his phone. I could tell this guy wasn't looking to be a hero, just there for a paycheck. I approached him, calm and casual. "Hey, I need a favor," I said, slipping a couple of $100 bills out of my wallet. I could see his eyes light up the second he saw the cash. "I need to see some footage, just for the last couple of weeks." No big deal. At first, he hesitated. I could see him weighing the risk in his head, probably thinking about whether this could come back to bite him. But like I said before, money talks. A few $100 was probably more than he made in a week, and he didn't need to know what I was really after. After a few more seconds of internal debate, he nodded. "Just don't tell anyone, all right?" He handed me a flash drive with all the security footage from the last 2 weeks. No questions, no paperwork, just the footage. I thanked him, walked out of there, and headed home, feeling like I was holding a ticking bomb in my pocket. When I got home, I booted up my laptop and plugged in the drive. The file was massive, hours upon hours of footage from all over the gym. There was no way I could go through it all alone, not in one night. I'd barely scratched the surface after a couple of hours, and all I'd seen were a bunch of people lifting weights, doing squats, and talking to the front desk staff. There was way too much to go through, and I needed to narrow it down. That's when I thought of Claire. If anyone could help me with this, it was her. She was calm, level-headed, and always had my back, even when I didn't realize I needed it. I sent her a message, keeping it light, just a "Hey, do you have time to catch up? I need to talk to you about something." She replied almost immediately, agreeing to meet me the next day. When we met, I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told her everything about the messages, the affair, the gym, and the tapes. Her reaction was what I expected: shock, disgust, and that genuine sympathy that I had always admired in her. She put her hand on mine as I talked, her face filled with concern. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You don't deserve this." "Not at all." I nodded, appreciating the sentiment, but my focus was on the task at hand. I showed her the footage, explained how I had too much to sift through, and asked if she could help me find what I was looking for. "Of course," she said without hesitation. "We'll get through this. I'll help you find it." So, we sat there, side by side, going through hours of footage together. We fast-forwarded through dozens of people doing their routines, watching the front desk camera for any sign of them sneaking around. It was tedious, boring even, but Claire didn't complain once. She was patient, focused, and quietly supportive in a way that I hadn't realized how much I needed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we found it. There they were, Jason and my wife, sneaking into one of the back rooms. I paused the video for a moment, took a deep breath, and hit play. I watched them laughing, touching, and then doing exactly what I expected. They didn't even bother to check if the camera was rolling. They were so confident no one would ever find out. It was all right there. Every filthy detail. Proof. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I had what I needed, but what was I supposed to do with it now? How do you even begin to process something like that? Claire poured us each a glass of wine, probably sensing how overwhelmed I felt. We sat in silence for a while, the footage still playing in the background, though I wasn't paying attention anymore. I felt numb. When it was time to leave, I hugged her goodbye. It was a friendly hug. At least that's what it was supposed to be. But Claire held on tight, her arms around me in a way that made it clear she wasn't just being polite. There was more to it. It felt comforting, safe, like she understood exactly what I was going through without me having to say anything. After a moment, I pulled back and thanked her again. "I don't know what I'd do without you," I said, meaning every word. She smiled, though there was something sad behind her eyes. "I'm always here for you, you know that." I nodded, and with that, I headed home. But my mind was racing. I had the proof. I had Claire's support, but I still had to play my role for a little longer. I needed to keep up the facade of the clueless, stupid husband. Timing was everything, and when I made my move, it was going to be perfect. After I had that footage in my hands, I knew I couldn't just sit on it for long. There was no point in dragging this out, pretending like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not just at her, but at myself. How had I let it get this far? How had I not seen the signs earlier? I didn't want to confront her in private. No, she deserved to be exposed in front of the people she thought she could fool. So, I came up with an idea. I suggested to my wife that we throw a party for one of our mutual friends. She was all in, of course. She loved being the center of attention, playing the perfect hostess. It gave me the perfect opportunity. When the night of the party came, everything was set up. The house was full of our friends, laughing, drinking, having a good time. And there she was, acting like nothing was wrong, chatting with people, smiling like she wasn't screwing someone else behind my back. It took every ounce of self-control not to snap right then and there, but I had a plan. Once everyone was settled in, I grabbed the remote and stood in front of the TV. "Hey guys, I've got something to show you," I said, trying to sound casual. She looked at me, probably thinking I was going to put on some stupid video or game highlights. But when I hit play and that footage from the gym started rolling, the room fell into complete silence. At first, there was confusion on their faces, like they didn't quite get what they were watching. But then, as the image became clear, her and Jason sneaking into the back room, the realization hit. Gasps, whispers, the sound of drinks being put down on tables. And her? She just stood there, frozen, her face turning white as she watched herself on the screen, caught in the act. Some people immediately spoke up. I heard someone mutter, "Jesus Christ," while another friend, who had always had a thing for morality, said, "That's disgusting." Others stayed quiet, awkwardly avoiding eye contact with her, clearly uncomfortable. The whole room was tense, like a bomb had gone off, and everyone was just waiting to see what happened next. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The proof was right there. They all saw it, and I knew, from that moment, that none of these people would look at her the same way again. Her perfect image? Shattered. Her lies? Exposed. And our marriage? Over. I walked out of the house after that. I didn't need to hear her excuses, her begging, or whatever bullshit she might try to pull. I just needed air. I needed to clear my head. So I walked. No destination in mind, just around the neighborhood, hands stuffed in my pockets, thinking about everything that had just happened. I felt angry, but more than that, I felt foolish. Like, how had I let this happen? How had I not seen the red flags from the start? I wasn't some innocent victim in this. I had ignored the signs, convinced myself things would get better, when in reality, I had been played for a fool. And then, as I was walking, I heard a car pull up beside me. I glanced over and saw Claire behind the wheel. She rolled down the window and called out, "You want to go for a ride?" I didn't hesitate. I just nodded and got in. We drove in silence for a while. Neither of us said a word, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. She knew what had just happened. She had been at the party. She had seen the video. There wasn't much to say. Eventually, she took us to this spot on the outskirts of town, a quiet, hidden place I didn't even know existed. It was up on a hill, overlooking the city. The lights below twinkled in the night, and the air was cool and still. It was beautiful, peaceful, a sharp contrast to the chaos I'd just left behind. She got out of the car and went to the trunk, pulling out a blanket. "I come here sometimes," she said softly, spreading the blanket on the ground. "It's a good place to think." We sat down together, side by side, and talked. Really talked. About everything, about my marriage, about how long she'd known something was wrong, about how she felt about me. I realized as we spoke that I hadn't felt this comfortable with anyone in a long time. There was no pressure, no judgment. Just her. At some point, she turned to me and hugged me. Not just a quick, friendly hug, but a real, deep embrace. And I hugged her back, feeling like for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. But then I pulled back, awkward, unsure. "I can't," I mumbled, half to her, half to myself. "I'm still married." She looked at me, her eyes soft but steady. "Do you still consider it a marriage?" she asked, her voice gentle but cutting right to the heart of the matter. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew the answer. I just nodded my head slowly, and before I knew it, we were kissing. It wasn't planned, but it felt right. And there, under the night sky, on that quiet hill with the city lights below us, we made love. It was incredible. It wasn't just about the physical part, though that was amazing too. It was the connection, the closeness, the feeling of being wanted and understood in a way I hadn't felt in years. Afterward, we drove back to her place. I wasn't ready to go home. Not yet. We spent the night together, and when we got there, we did it again. It was like a dam had broken, all the pent-up emotions and frustrations spilling out in those few hours. That night was the first time in a long time I felt truly free. And I knew, in that moment, things were never going to be the same again. Not with my wife, not with Claire, not with me. The next morning, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. As much as last night with Claire had been a turning point, I still had to face the mess I'd left at home. My wife had been exposed, humiliated, and I knew she wasn't going to take it quietly. There was no avoiding the conversation that was waiting for me. I had to talk to her about the divorce and everything that had gone down. When I got home, she was already waiting for me, and the second I walked through the door, the atmosphere was tense. She didn't waste any time. "You ruined everything, you idiot," she screamed, her face twisted with anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stood there, silent for a moment, letting her words wash over me. Honestly, I had expected something like this. She wasn't the type to go down without a fight, and now that her secret was out, she was cornered, lashing out at anyone she could. "I didn't ruin anything," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You did that all by yourself." We argued. Of course we did. She threw insults at me, calling me an idiot, saying I'd embarrassed her in front of everyone, that I was going to be in trouble for what I'd done. But I didn't back down. I wasn't going to let her turn this around on me. "This is on you," I told her. "And now we're done. I want a divorce." That seemed to hit her harder than I expected. For a moment, she looked like she was going to snap, but then she took a deep breath, her expression shifting. "Fine," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll get your divorce. You want out?" You'll have it. I left the house after that, needing to clear my head. It wasn't until later that I realized just how serious she was about making things difficult for me. One day, while I was out running some errands for the business, something happened that I hadn't seen coming. I was walking back to my car, just minding my own business, when I saw one of her colleagues, one of those gym rats she worked with, not Jason, but another one, a guy built like a brick wall. He was standing across the street, and I could tell right away that he was looking for me. There was something about the way he was just waiting, watching. Before I could even think about turning around or getting out of there, he was on me. I didn't stand a chance. Even if he had given me a warning, it wouldn't have mattered. The guy was built to hurt people, and I didn't see it coming. He threw a punch, and before I knew it, I was on the ground, my head spinning, his fists raining down on me. I remember the sound of my ribs cracking under the force of his blows. Then everything went dark. When I came to, I was in the hospital. A nurse was by my side, adjusting the machines I was hooked up to, and across the room, there was an officer waiting. As soon as I was awake enough, he came over and started asking questions. I couldn't remember everything right away. It was all a blur of pain and confusion. But eventually, the pieces started coming back. The attack, the guy's face. I told the officer everything I could. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctor said I had a concussion and a broken rib. 2 long weeks of lying there, replaying everything in my head, trying to piece together what had led to that moment. I knew it had something to do with my wife. There was no other reason her colleague would go after me like that. She must have been talking about me, getting people riled up. At the end of those 2 weeks, they caught the guy. The officer came back to the hospital, asking me if I could identify the attacker. And you bet I could. I'd never forget his face. I pointed him out in the lineup without hesitation. The guy looked back at me with a smug expression, like he thought he could intimidate me even from the other side of that glass. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was pissed. He got sentenced to 3 years. 3 years for assaulting me without warning, for trying to take me out because of whatever lies or loyalty he thought he had. I don't know if my wife had anything to do with it directly, but by that point, I didn't care. The damage was done, and he was the one who paid for it. As for me, those weeks in the hospital gave me time to think, time to plan, time to finally decide how I was going to close this chapter of my life for good. The divorce process was as messy as you'd expect, but honestly, after everything that had already happened, it felt more like a formality than anything else. My marriage had been over long before I filed the paperwork. By the time I walked into the courtroom, it was like I was just tying up loose ends, cleaning up the remnants of a life that no longer felt like mine. Of course, my wife, or should I say ex-wife now, didn't make it easy. She tried to drag it out, tried to stir up drama in court, but the truth was she didn't have much ground to stand on. We didn't have kids, which I guess was a small blessing, and our finances were mostly separate, thanks to my business being mine alone. She couldn't touch that, and I made sure of it. Still, she made a lot of noise. She blamed me for everything, said I had humiliated her in front of all our friends and ruined her reputation. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Her reputation? She was the one who had been screwing a guy behind my back in a public place, and somehow I was the villain? It was absurd. But that's how people like her operate. They twist things, try to make you feel like you're the crazy one, like you're the one who's in the wrong. I didn't bite. I let her rant, let her accuse me of being petty, of ruining everything. I knew what the truth was, and so did everyone else who mattered. In the end, the divorce went through, and she walked away with nothing more than her own guilt and whatever she could salvage from the wreckage of her life. I got the house, my business, and most importantly, my freedom, and that was all I needed. During this time, Claire was a constant in my life. We hadn't defined our relationship. Hell, after everything I'd been through, I wasn't even sure what I wanted or needed. But Claire was there. She was steady, supportive, and unlike my ex-wife, she didn't need to manipulate or control anything. She was just herself, and that was more than enough. We spent more and more time together after the divorce started moving forward. At first, it was simple. Dinners at her place, movie nights, quiet conversations about life, and everything that had gone wrong in mine. But as time passed, our connection deepened. I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't with anyone in years. There was something about her that made it easy. She didn't push, didn't pry. She just listened, and for once I felt like someone actually cared about me, not what I could do for them. By the time my divorce was finalized, I realized that Claire wasn't just someone to lean on during tough times. She was more than that. She was someone I could see a future with, someone who had been there for me when I needed it most and asked for nothing in return. We hadn't labeled anything yet, but I knew in my heart where this was headed. I wasn't in a rush, though. After everything that had happened, I was taking it one day at a time, letting things evolve naturally. As for my friends, I honestly don't know what I would have done without them. After I got out of the hospital, they were all there for me, even the ones I hadn't seen in a while. They came to visit me while I was laid up in that hospital bed, cracking jokes, bringing me takeout because hospital food is basically inedible, and just making sure I didn't go insane from boredom and frustration. Each of them played their part. Some offered advice, others just kept me distracted, but it meant the world to me. One of my closest friends even said, "You know, man, we all thought she was bad news. We just didn't want to say anything." At first, that stung a bit, like, why didn't anyone tell me earlier? But then I realized it wouldn't have mattered. I was too deep in it, too blinded by the idea of who I thought my wife was. I wouldn't have listened. But they were still there for me, even after everything came crashing down. That's real friendship. They didn't judge me or say, "I told you so." They just supported me, plain and simple. And when you've been through the kind of betrayal I experienced, knowing you've got people in your corner like that is priceless. As I lay there in the hospital, surrounded by my friends, Claire by my side, I realized how lucky I actually was. Yeah, I had been through hell, but I came out of it with something even more valuable. People who truly cared about me. It wasn't about material things or status. It was about genuine connections, and that's something no amount of money or success can replace. The divorce dragged on for months, but once it was all said and done, I walked out of that courthouse feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It was over. The chapter had closed, and I was free to move forward with my life, to rebuild, to start fresh. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone drag me down again. Looking back, I know I made mistakes. I ignored red flags. I trusted the wrong person. But that's life. You live, you learn, and if you're lucky, you come out the other side stronger for it. To everyone reading this, I want to say thanks. Thanks for sticking with me through this whole ordeal. Writing this out, sharing it with you, has been cathartic in a way I didn't expect. It's helped me process everything. And if my story helps even one person avoid the kind of bullshit I went through, then it was worth it. Take care of yourselves. Pay attention to the people around you. Don't let anyone treat you like less than you deserve. And most importantly, trust your instincts. They're there for a reason. Good luck.